All right. Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Sonia McGowan with Covenant Pediatric Wellness Center, and I am so excited because I am here with Jamie Filley for part two. So we met, gosh, this is March. So I guess it was January, right, Jamie, that you were
Yeah,
here
yeah,
and we were talking about your whole journey with Beau.
yes.
And so we got to talking and we ran out of time, and you have so much to say, and people had so many questions and that we just weren't able to get to. So we just thought it would be great to do a part two. So this time we have more time, and we're just going to jump into it. So first of all, for the people who are watching, we will do our best to answer questions when it makes sense. So definitely drop any comments or questions into the comment box, and we will do our best to answer anything that you have in terms of questions. Um, and so, yeah, here we go. Let's just jump in. So, Jamie, kind of give us a little recap of what we covered back in January. Tell us about your family and Beau, and just sort of what we covered when we were together before.
Okay, sounds good. Well, what we talked about last time was I introduced myself. My name's Jamie, obviously. I have Beau, who is getting ready to turn 6, and he has an autism diagnosis and co occurring conditions along with that. I also have another daughter. I'm a homeschool mom to her, and me and my husband have been married for about 10 years. And I live here in mid Missouri. We started working with you 3 years ago now. It was when he was turning 3. And what we talked about was just kind of the things leading up to his diagnosis and his issues, um, and the vaccine injury that he had. We also talked a lot about the different testing that we've done at Covenant, and I emphasized it's so important to test blood work and stool analysis, urine analysis, and we talked a little bit about the results we've seen from that. And we also talked about towards the end, I kind of got into, but wait, there's more. With mold toxicity and mycotoxins and things like that. So I'd like to get into a little bit more of that today because, like you said, there's just not enough time in the world. And last time we ran out, but that's kind of what we talked about last time.
Yeah.
If you're watching today and you didn't watch the last live.
So I can't believe he was 3 when we started with each
Yeah.
other.
Yes.
And you were hesitant, weren't you, to kind of get started with all of this and to bring him in and all of that. So you were hesitant and you waited a little while. Tell us a little bit about that.
I did. I kind of referenced this in the first live too of I got to work right away with like the biomedical approach as soon as I realized what was going on. He was about 15 months old. And but we did something called the Nemetschek protocol, which was very important in Beau's healing journey. Can't stress that enough. However, there's different things I disagree with the founder of that protocol, that doctor, on. He's very dogmatic, and that like this is the only way to go and don't do anything else while you're doing this or it'll mess everything up. And we had seen such progress with that protocol that I was like, okay, it's like don't touch anything, don't move kind of thing. Other than, I mean, we were doing the diet. We started gluten-free, casein-free, dye-free, just a very whole foods clean diet right away, because I thought, well, that's silly how that makes no sense how he's not kind of emphasizing that you can do some things and it's not going to mess anything up. Um, but I was scared to do too many other types of supplements or protocols along with that. And while I like walked that through, obviously I realized that doesn't make a lot of sense, and I just kind of walked through that. And then it was just finding like what provider should I work with, because TACA, the Autism Community in Action organization, they talk a lot about MAPS practitioners. And so, okay, where can I find a MAPS practitioner? And lo and behold, you was just an hour from me. So that's kind of how I landed here. And what was some of my hesitation of not doing that at 1.5 and versus waiting until he was 3.
Gotcha. So how important, so moms and dads ask me all the time, oh my gosh, changing of the diet is so hard, especially when you've got a kid who's a selective eater and they already only eat, 5 or 6 things. From your perspective and in your experience, how important is a clean diet or potentially a gluten and casein free diet?
Yeah. The first thing that I saw when I started researching, autism in the medical model was diet. I mean, you're going to immediately see gluten free, casein free. And there's a reason for that. While I can't clearly say what gains we've had from it versus what we haven't, some things in our journey are pretty easy to see because there's, nothing else going on at that time. I started that very quickly along with the Nemechek protocol. They were pretty back to back. So what was one versus what was the other, I don't know for sure. But if you do talk to more experienced moms than myself, it's if there's surveys in our TACA group or whatever, that's the number one intervention is diet. And that's really saying something because we're also big believers in other things coming alongside of diet. And for that to be ranked the highest, just taking that from a group perspective and not just mine, I would never want to back out of, well, maybe it was more Nemechek and not diet, and let me go ahead and throw in some gluten. Although we're not perfect and we have infractions, as they're called, he got a hold of this cracker or whatever it may be. It's really foundational. I don't want to pull out the foundation while I'm trying to build the tower. Having that foundation, I think, is really important. And I know it's so hard. I'm not condemning or judging anybody for thinking it's hard or how do I do this or not wanting to do it. That is not the type of food I grew up on or ate. I'm a plump girl and I've not made the healthiest choices throughout my life, but you can't deny science and how things affect our bodies. And the younger you do it, the better. It's a lot easier. It was a lot easier for me to do it with Beau when he was barely chewing solids versus me as a woman in my 30s. So, and TACA has a lot of great tips. I have a lot of great lists of food that you can buy. Feel free to message me and I will give you the different list of, okay, this is a great crunchy snack. This actually tastes good. Not all gluten-free, dye-free food tastes like garbage. Like there's plenty of foods that taste great. So I want to encourage you in that. While also not taking away from, I know it's hard. I just think that it's worth it.
Got it.
So
let's jump into the whole mold conversation. So toxins that come from mold are called mycotoxins. So sometimes we'll interchange mold and mycotoxins. They mean the same thing.
Yeah.
So tell us about your walk through that situation.
I don't wish mold on anyone. If you know me in real life or you listened to me on the last video, I'm a very big on, I'm a like a vaccine advocate for the harm that that's doing to children. But mold is so much trickier in other ways because it's not just deciding, hey, I'm not going to participate in mold. Can be in your home, it can be in your child's school, and it's not just like a decision that you're making. And it also impacts your finances. It's like, well, what do you do if you don't have $300,000 to build a new home? So mold is a very touchy subject for a lot of people because it's just very difficult to deal with. But we discovered we had a mycotoxin situation. It was this late summer of 2023, so about a year and a half ago. And I had always planned to test for that. That was always on my list. It's just, there's so much on my list that it took a little bit of time to get to. And we discovered we had that in our air ducts. And so we had to move out of our house for a couple of months. We put in all new air ducts, throughout our house, among other things. We discovered we had water damage we did not know about. Even the mold company that came out to assess our house, they didn't know we had it. It doesn't always register on the, they have kind of a device that they use to see, okay, we can see water damage through here. If it's older, they don't always pick up on that. So while we were tearing up our carpet because we knew the mycotoxins were going to settle into the carpet, we discovered there's water damage here in multiple places. So it took a couple of months. My husband did most of the work himself, all of the work himself. And things still aren't perfect. Like we still have different little things we need to do that we'll be doing this spring. But we moved out, we made those remediations, we moved back in. And as soon as we discovered that, we had started him on a protocol, like a detox protocol, you could say. And oh, the changes we saw were just amazing. It's been a really big part of our journey. And sometimes the things that you see aren't always what you expect to see. Um, I think I was rooting more for like behavior changes, which are super deep and layered with Beau, but we saw a lot of motor skill changes that were just very obvious. And I don't know why that was so surprising to me, but it was such a difference with motor changes. He went from not even being able to put on his own pull up to dressing himself completely, learning how to pedal a tricycle, started drawing little people. It was all just like, wow, in that area. There was other areas too, but that was the big one that like just surprised me. The big changes was the motor skills. And his school, who they're used to me kind of saying, oh, well, we're doing this part, we're doing that, in passing. I mean, they were meeting me at the door like, what's going on? He's completely different. So there was behavior changes too, but they were just so shocked at how different he was. So it's been a big part of our journey. So I really encourage parents to do the mycotoxin test, rule out mold. Like I was saying towards the end of our first live, even if you know your child was vaccine injured, it doesn't mean that there's not other contributing factors to what's impacting their health and their behaviors and their function. In fact, it makes them more susceptible to those things. So you have to look at those factors, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense because what we know is that generally most complex kids have what I call a wounding event. So sometimes that's early antibiotic exposure, sometimes it's early anesthesia, sometimes it's vaccines, and that really
Yeah.
sets up their system to be more vulnerable to things like mold that and it makes them sort of like the canary in the coal mine, right? So there
Yes.
could be a whole family living in a house that has mycotoxins. Everybody else
Yeah.
is fine, but the
Mhm.
the complex kid is the one showing the symptoms
Exactly.
because
Exactly.
their system was just set up to be vulnerable because of whatever their wounding event was. So we did the mycotox profile from Mosaic Diagnostics on him and
Mhm.
remind us what did we find on that test?
Just wow. I don't even remember what strand, because there's different mycotoxins that are on that test. And it sounds terrible, but the amount of testing that we've done so far, I can't remember everything of like what strain was it, oxytocin A
Oh,
or however you pronounce that.
ochratoxin, yep.
Yeah, like there was different ones. But we'd set up a protocol, and I mean he was on it very long term. In fact, I just pulled one of the things that was a big part of that just a few months ago. I mean, we did it forever. We were very aggressive with it. And of course, all the other building blocks that we had set up got us to that point to where he was treatable. So it's not like, well, we shouldn't have done diet first. We shouldn't have done this and this and this first. All of that was helping him to be able to detox and to really combat that. And like you said, you know, my husband was fine. I was fine. My daughter was fine. Of course, after you find out, we each have our own little issue, or maybe medium sized issue, or even maybe a little bit big that we're like, is that from mycotoxins? You don't know.
Yeah.
But I have a pretty good idea that we each have a little bit that is probably due to that. It just doesn't affect us in the same way it affects Beau. And it's all about total toxic load theory.
Yeah.
So um, I think Patricia Lemur was the first person that coined that term, either total load theory or total toxic load theory. So imagine a bridge, and each bridge has a certain weight limit before it's going to collapse, right? And maybe Beau's weight limit is just less than somebody else's son. But we each have a weight limit. And when a certain amount of semis are on top of that bridge, and vans and Jeeps and cars, eventually it's going to collapse. And as big of an advocate as I am, I believe that vaccinations are semis on those bridges. We also have to look at the Jeeps and the cars and the regular size trucks. Like we have to look at all those things, and mold is such a big one. And I tend to find there's three groups. There's the people that have done the mycotoxin testing, and they've figured out they were combating mold. There's people that have not tested and they know they need to do it and they're kind of scared to do it. And then there's the people that have ruled it out. They've done it, they've ruled it out. But I honestly find that third group is pretty small. Usually you fall into the camp of you've done the testing and you've discovered you do have a mycotoxin situation, or you're just scared to do it. And I understand that fear, but it's really important to do it because you're going to need to know that information. There's no really like moving forward if that's going to keep constantly holding you back. For example, all the work we had done, although it had helped Beau so much, he was still having like such absorption issues, if you remember. So he couldn't absorb, he could only absorb a certain amount of the, things we were giving him, the supplements and such, because of that. And then once we really treated the mold, he was able to have such better absorption.
Yes, because one of the things mycotoxins does to you physiologically is it disrupts your digestive system.
Mhm.
So, it changes your brain, it changes your digestion, it increases your total toxin load.
Yeah.
And so, I generally tell parents when they're on the fence about this, they'll say, I don't think we have mold. I don't really know. I say exactly what you said, that if it's there and we don't know it, it's always going to be a roadblock. So,
Yeah.
if at all possible, let's test it, let's rule it in, rule it out. And, once we have that information, then we can move forward with a plan that makes the most sense.
Yes. And it's
Yeah.
if you get a result that's great and you're ruling it out, that's the best few $100s you'll ever spend, is to
Yeah.
rule it out and to have that weight off of you and to know that, okay, that's not going on right now.
So talk about let's vaccines. It's a
Mhm.
hot topic, right? You're very vocal about it.
Yeah.
In my life, my personal life and my professional life, I've been vocal about it too. So
Mhm.
how does that all weave together from your perspective?
Yeah, great question. I think this is what a lot of people don't understand, and maybe I should have said at the beginning of my last video. And I was thinking back to before every life event has happened to me, of like my understanding of like what vaccine injury looked like and what it was. And I think I knew that I knew that it could happen, but I also thought maybe it was more of like, forgive me for not having the right words, like a brain injury that there's nothing you can do about it, like an intellectual disability, that it's just that person has like a brain injury. And I'm not saying that there's no brain injuries happening, but what I'm saying is, Marcella Piper Terry, she's an anti-vaccine advocate who words this so well. So if you don't follow her, you should. Other people, I know you do, but she talks about how this is it's like a dirty bomb and how it disrupts every system in your body. So that's the jump from, okay, why do you say your child's vaccine injured, but then you're talking about all these gut issues and mitochondrial dysfunction and all these things. It just disrupts every system in your body, and you could, I'm sure, really speak to that. And you see those test results and that patient after patient after patient is doing. And the more you study it, the more you're like, okay, this links to this and this links to this and this caused that. And it's such a chain of events that happen throughout the body. And so what we're doing, what Dr. Sonia does with her patients, what I'm doing as a parent, is we're trying to treat all of that devastation that has happened within the body. And it does prime you for more sensitivity. So maybe me and Brenna and Michael and Ty could live in our house and we would be fine and never know it. Beau can't handle that kind of toxin load because his bridge is already collapsed. So that's kind of what I think that I really thought before, like, oh, that's just, there's nothing you can do. So even though that sounds really negative, that it devastates the whole body, there is hope of treating that medically and treating all of those different injuries from a medical model.
Gotcha. So we've got a really good question here from Cora Cora. She says, Dr. Sonia, what mold test brand would you recommend to test an adult grown man for mold? Is there an at-home test you could order? For example, something like Push Health or Vibrant Health. So Cora, I recommend the mycotox profile from Mosaic Diagnostics. It does have to be ordered by a physician. But you can find one in your area, I'm sure. That test is right in the neighborhood of $300. It's a urine test, and it's great for any age. Basically, kids can do it, adults can do it. The results are applicable for adults as well as kids, and that is what I use. There are other labs who also have similar tests, but I find that the mycotox profile I feel like it's very reliable, it's
Mhm.
affordable, it's urine, so that makes it easy for kids. And so that is the test that I use in my clinic. All right, Jamie. So um, let's talk about Beau's progress. Kind
Yeah.
of describe him when he was littler
Yeah.
and to where he is now.
My favorite subject. I could go on and on about him. So when we started, I mean, Beau was just so, oh, it's just, I mean, it's hard to find the right word. So we did the First Steps program through Missouri. That's kind of what you do before you're in the school system at 3 years old. And you get an evaluation from First Steps. And the woman who evaluated him is still a dear friend to this day. She is just was such a godsend in that time. But they evaluate you based on different areas. Maybe it's motor skills, communication, things like that. I mean, he was like a baby. He was 15, 16. He was 16 months at the time, and he was 6-month-old level. It was no problem getting services. So he was so in his own world. I mean, when she walked through the door that day, it didn't look like there was anybody in the room. you know he wasn't responding to anybody except for me and his dad, and by responding I mean even recognizing that someone was in the same room with him. That's how deeply um, injured that he was. No eye contact, no. It was actually him laughing at his sister and acknowledging her that really shook me awake. She had done something that he laughed at. And it was just more like because it was a movement by his face, she was running. And that's what shook me awake of like, that's what he should be doing all the time. And he hasn't done that since he was a little baby. And so he just wasn't recognizing anyone. There was no speech. There was no, you know, you go through the whole list of your child might have autism if, and it's just like check, 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 check. He was so far into his world, there was nothing. And then we started the Nemetschek protocol and the diet. And over the months before, at 3 years old, we came to your clinic. We did other things as well, which may be a later conversation, such as Epsom salt baths and lots of time outdoors. And we did Fiji water, which is silica water for aluminum detox, like a light detox, which was very interesting. So we did those things, but he just went from that to where he is today. And where he is today is certainly not, oh, he's, good to go. He has no issues at all. But I don't compare Beau to like other children. I compare his progress to where was he when we started and where the path he was truly headed on and where he is today. So whereas it may be one parent's like worst nightmare where he's at today, to us it's, and anybody that's been around him for a very long time knows it's just miraculous. And now he, you see his personality and he can truly have relationships with us. He can't converse like you and I are conversing, but it's nowadays, which I'll get into this with HBOT. I mean, it's kind of like we're having our own type of conversations. He has a sense of humor. He's so ornery. He knows when he's being ornery. He teases. The other day he was making mud pies for hours in the yard and coming in and saying, making mud pies. Like he's such a typical little boy in so many different ways. And we get to see his personality and, not to mention like his motor skills and just different things that are coming along. He's writing his name and I could just probably do a whole PowerPoint presentation on like all the things he's doing now. And yes, we have a long way to go and a lot of issues, but it's like I said, I don't compare him to other children. I'm comparing to what path was Beau headed down without medical intervention.
So talk to us about what you envision that could have been if you had gotten no intervention for him other than maybe first steps and other than maybe special
Mhm.
services at school. What was his future?
Well, I want to say this delicately, and um, I hope nobody will misinterpret what I'm saying, but very ironically, you might say ironically, I think that it was just God ordained, you could say. But ironically enough, up until I had Beau, the day I went into labor, I worked for the Missouri Schools for the Severely Disabled. So I was not a teacher. I was in administration. I was the secretary. And so Missouri has schools that are for children with severe disabilities that maybe their school can't meet their needs. And so they come to our schools, or was our school, I still say our. And that would have been like the path Beau was headed down. And those children were precious to me and are precious to me. And again, I hope nobody is misinterpreting what I'm saying, but he was definitely, I had the moment where I realized I worked there and now my son's going to be a student there. And now that's no longer his path. And it's fine if it is someone's path, and some of the most amazing teachers and people you work with there. But now he's able to, that's not the best fit for him. And I'm not sure if that makes any sense. And
It does.
it would take probably a lot of time to get out the words to kind of describe how I feel like I knew exactly where he was headed, and kind of just like a God moment that I've seen the change, and okay, this is where he's now headed.
So one of my favorite stories about Beau's progress is when he came home and he was pretend playing, which was a new and great skill for him, and he was pretending about Miss Jackie and me. Tell
Yeah.
that story.
That was so cute. He was with my mom. My mom was babysitting him, and we had kind of recently, I mean, it had been a minute, but it kind of recently we had blood work here. And he got out this doctor's kit that him and my little girl have. And he got it out and he was playing with my mom, and he was, putting the thing up to her ear and her knee. And he was saying different things like, it's okay, just take deep breaths, and jabbering about Miss Jackie and Dr. Sonia. And yeah, it was the cutest. My mom was like so excited to tell me, and it was such a cute moment. Yeah.
Well, it's so sweet to know that he knows us,
Hmm.
right? And I think except for the blood draw moments, I think he loves us.
Yeah.
But, when I met him, he was completely nonverbal and he had no real play skills. Like he had
Yeah.
some stereotypic kinds of, you know, different sorts of play skills. But
Yeah.
to do a role play like that
Hmm.
and to use words to describe what he's playing, I mean, that is such a huge developmental leap. It's almost indescribable what that
It
means.
it is. Yeah, he plays with toys completely typically. I'm not saying like if he has peers around or like Brenna that he's gonna completely like not scream at her that he wants the block to himself, but he plays with toys typically. And now for the last couple of months, like when he wakes up, play toys, like, can I go do that? Yeah, you can go play with toys. And he he's had this imagination burst, which I'll get into a little bit with the HBOT especially, but um he just, yeah, he plays with toys typically. Where he was before, there was one toy that was it was like a fishing pole thing. Walmart has it, and it's supposed to be a bath toy, and it's this magnetic thing that clicks, and that's all he would sit there and do, before. And so, yeah, to see him now, I'm making mud pies, I'm flying a kite, I'm riding a bike, I'm playing with my cars and trucks. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
So, you've mentioned HBOT a couple of times. So jump
Mhm.
in and tell everybody about your experience with HBOT at our clinic.
And the reason I'm probably bringing that up so much is because we just finished last week a 40-hour round on Wednesday, actually. So I had told in the first live, I think, that I would update on this one, kind of how that went, because prior to now, we had already done 2 rounds. We did one when he was 3.5 and one when he was 4.5. And it was life changing. And I'm so glad that you recommended for me to do that. And then we just finished last week a 40-hour round. And I said I would talk about the gains with that. This time, what we saw is in the speech and communication area, and the imagination and like pretend play and kind of abstract play. And so I kind of touched on this already with the speech. He's not conversational yet the way me and you are, but now I have so much more hope for conversations, because he was already verbal, largely in part due to HBOT in the past, but now with this round, he's doing so many like questions, like he wants to know, what are we doing later? Where's this thing at? And just, I don't know. I'm having more back and forth interactions with him versus it's not just cookies, where I know he wants a cookie. We're kind of going back and forth. And I feel like in our own way, we are having little conversations. And so we've seen a huge burst in that. And then the other one we kind of touched on was this pretend play and imagination. it's really weird. It's so cool because the last time we did HBOT, it was a year and a half ago. And that was like, we started to see at the end of that just a tiny bit of imagination. The first we had saw, the example I had given in my write up for that before was he had found a stick that was curved and he came up to me and he said, elephant, elephant. And I knew that that meant he was thinking of like the elephant's trunk. And so that was like mind blowing and exciting. And it's like he picked up where he left off with that gain. And now some things he's done, this is cool. So if you know the Disney movie Cars, where like CARS, Cars, there's books, there's movies, you know how Disney does different things. He's obsessed with cars right now. He likes to play with cars and trucks in general, but he has, I don't know, like when you're with a kid, I remember being a kid and you would see like a Disney princess and be like, I'm that one. You know, that one's me. I'm Cinderella. And
Yeah.
your friend is Snow White or whatever. He is doing that. So, like, he is imagining the Cars characters as him and his friends. And he's like, he says, I'm Beau's Lightning McQueen. And, you know, this friend, I won't name him by name, is this one. And this friend is this one. And he's doing that. And then he does the same thing with our family. It's funny. In our family, dad gets to be the main character. Dad's Lightning McQueen. And he's just like the blue car in our family. And then Ty, his brother, is Mater. And mommy's the girl car. And grandma's the yellow car. And he's doing this kind of abstract, like, imagination that's hard to describe until you're like, wait, typical like children do that. Like, this is a big leap. He's doing that. He has magnetiles and he's been making all since HBOT. He's been making, he'll make a car wash and he'll take his cars through them. Or he'll
Wow.
tell me he's building a store shop, which is a grocery store. And he goes and he gets his pretend food and puts it in his store shop. So yeah, we've seen those two big gains. And most parents report most of their changes actually happen within the 2 to 3 weeks following HBOT, kind of when the body's more at rest. And so we don't even know that we've seen everything that we're going to see because we're only 5 days post. So pretty cool.
So, for people who've never seen an HBOT chamber or been inside one, talk about what the experience is. What does it look like? How do you get in? How does it
Yeah.
feel when it pressurizes? Tell everybody about that.
Yeah. It's funny. Beau calls it our fort. So like just this morning, he's like, go to our fort. And I'm like, no, we're all done with our fort. Like he's still like, are we going? We call it our fort. Some kids, like, depending on their level, they might call it a spaceship. You might just come up with your own name for it, but Beau calls it our fort. And it's kind of, I mean, you can go on Covenant's like website and see it, but you get in, it's super roomy. And Beau's always stuffing pillows and stuff in there. It's super roomy. You can lay down. And at first, you know, your ears are more sensitive. I don't fly a lot, but I imagine it's like, you know, how your ears pressurize with flying. But if you go to my Facebook page, I give I have a post where there's tips for this is what I would do if you're going to do it. Beau and I chew gum. I hold my nose and blow out to get my ears to pop. He will like imitate it, but he doesn't know to like blow out. So it's just more like, you know, he's sitting there doing that. But I give him like a salty like snack, like potato chips or something that makes him thirsty. That way he'll drink and it kind of swallowing helps pop your ears. So there's different tricks and stuff that you can do. But after your first few times, your ears get so much more used to it. It's just like the first few times, like I'll get butterflies, like, oh, are our ears going to pop or not? But after the first few times, your body really adjusts. And yeah, for those kids that don't quite understand that concept like I do with blowing out, there's different ways like swallowing to help them adjust. But Beau will watch videos or read his books or play with his cars in there. There's plenty of room. Sometimes I laugh / get on to him because I'll be like laying down, you know, trying to relax. And he's got all this room in the world, yet he's deciding to lay on top of me. I'm like, you have this whole room here, like scoot down. I take the most amazing naps in there. I don't know what it is. And I need to research it further of like, why do some people feel so like energized? I understand that because your body, like you're creating more mitochondria, but also for some, it is such a rest and relaxation thing to where they're getting the best sleep. And that's me. So I was like napping in there every day. And then I would go home and I would sleep at night. And it was the deepest sleep I had gotten in years. So I don't know. I'm like, does that say, is that something bad about me? Is my mitochondria so dysfunctioned that, that I needed that? But that's kind of what, and the time flies. I read or I sleep in there. Beau plays. I do let him watch videos. I'm not typically like just let him have a tablet all day type of person. But while we're in there, like, sure, like it's definitely worth it. And he will watch videos or he'll read with me and we talk and he plays his cars. He has a favorite toy that's in the lobby that he'll get and he'll bring in there every time.
So how long do you stay in each time?
2 hours. So you can do less. I'm an hour away, so we're going to, of course, do 2. I wouldn't recommend, if it was me, doing less than an hour and a half, other than like your first time. I remember the first time we did the hour. You want to see how, you're going to do. But pretty quickly after that, we went to 2 hours. I wouldn't do less than an hour and a half to get kind of the most out of the session. And you don't want to go over 2. I mean, the research that I've seen, which of course, is a little bit few and far between, but the different case studies I've seen or whatever, there's really not much benefit to going over 2 hours. Is my understanding. I could be wrong, but we do 2 hours at a time. So, let's say 2:45 to 4:45, we're in there, and then they bring us back down. It kind of goes up on the pressure, and then you come back down at the end.
So when people get into our HBOT chamber, we zip you up, we buckle you up, and then we turn it on.
Yeah.
There's a hum, like you hear the motor,
Yeah.
but it's not offensive. It's not I'm a very, very sound sensitive person, and it does not bother me. It's kind of a low hum, and you feel and you can see the chamber pressurized. So it gets bigger like a balloon.
Yeah.
And once it reaches pressure, then that's where you stay.
That's where you stay. Yeah. And somebody's in the room with you that works here at Covenant, like until you're at full pressure, and they'll ask as you're going up, are you okay? Are you okay? And I struggle with a chronic ear issue from like a ruptured eardrum. And so there was one time throughout this process where I'm like, oh, my ear's not popping. I got to get out. And I did it right away. Ironically enough, you adjusted me and I was good to go like a day and a half later.
Yeah.
So it was like a chiropractic thing that helped me. But you can tell, and that was just from if you have like drainage behind your ears. And I'm so prone to that that's what happened. But you can catch that before you get too far and then just say, darn it, this isn't working out. I think I must have some drainage in my ear. But yeah, it's and the hum that you were talking about, actually, I'm weird. I find it the low hum relaxing because I have to sleep with a fan on. And so it just knocks me out. I'm just asleep. I'm sitting here trying to read my book and my eyes are drooping.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's important to know too, some people feel claustrophobic and they're afraid that they're not going to be able to sort of handle that enclosed space. But I bought a big one.
It's big.
Yeah, it really is. I'm 5'10" and I can easily sit up crisscross applesauce and work on a computer or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we've had a handful of people who with claustrophobia just couldn't tolerate it. But for the most part, patients do really well. And if they need a break, as we pressure up, we can stop it and just pause for a second and kind of let people go at their own pace. So, people who are nervous about getting in, we're super chill around here. We're not going to fuss at someone if you can't make it to full pressure.
Yeah, they're very understanding. And other than the one time I had to get out, there was one time this time that I'm like, oh, can you pause? Like we were like halfway. It's taken, I think Beau's was whining. It's taken him a little bit longer. And they're like, yeah, of course. And they just waited. I've never dealt with the claustrophobia with that. I'm not saying I couldn't understand, but it is so big.
Yeah.
Like it's really roomy. And it just expands. And so there are different sizes of chambers. There's stand-up chambers that are a little bit smaller and you just kind of sit. But this one is really roomy and it gets roomier, of course, as it expands. Yeah.
So sometimes my husband and I like to live on the edge and we'll have a date night on the weekend.
Nice.
We'll come to the clinic and we'll both get in the chamber and do a session. He sits on one end and I sit the other and our feet meet in the middle and we have plenty of room. So
that's my kind of date night. I like
that.
And
so we always let parents come in with kids. Like that's the reason I bought a big one because some of our kids are little and they can't be in by themselves. So, so HBOT has been a big deal for your family.
It was. And like I said, if you haven't heard me talk about it in the past, go back on my Facebook page and look. And I kind of detailed, this is what we saw from our first round of 40 hours, that's really how we got speech. I mean, Beau started saying his ABCs and counting, and I'm like, what's happening? And it was more than just speech from his first time. Things like his chronic cradle cap that he'd had since like birth, it disappeared, because it can help so many issues, skin, whatever. But I have a whole list of from our first time, from our second time, and then, like I said, kind of detailed today what we've seen so far from our third. But it's been a game changer. I wish more families could try it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Wish more families did.
So let's talk about the medical model, the whole I need to just accept my child the way they are. That there's a little controversy there. Talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I feel very passionately on this topic. There, for some reason, is this thought that it's a competing idea, that of like accepting your child and pursuing the medical model for autism, that those are competing ideas. And I don't understand that, and I vehemently disagree. And I'll explain why. I love Beau and I love his personality. And I don't understand why it's not accepting him for who he is to pursue medical care. You would not say that to a parent that if their kid like had a broken leg and they went and got a cast. You wouldn't say that if they had diabetes and they needed insulin. You wouldn't say that if they had cancer and they were, trying to defeat the cancer. You don't say that about anything else. But for some reason with autism, it's like you don't accept them for who they are. And I don't think that that's loving Beau for me to say, oh, great. You can't get that thought out of your mind because you're obsessing over it, or you're head banging, or you're biting yourself. I'm going to celebrate that. That's awesome. Like, that would make me a horrible parent. Like, I don't understand how that is not accepting him for who he is. In fact, I've been able to see his personality more the better he feels. I now include into his personality of how, he would be the class clown when he's not dealing with his issues, how he teases, how he loves to be tickled. I get to see his personality shine brighter when he's feeling better. It's not taking away from who he is. And it just comes down to, I don't believe autism is who Beau is. It's something he has. And I put myself in his shoes. If I developed any kind of disability, if I went blind tomorrow, or if I became paralyzed tomorrow, I wouldn't say that's who I am. I would say that's something that happened to my body, and that's not who I am. It's something that I have. And so I don't think that it's a competing idea to love and accept your child and to pursue, sometimes things happen in our bodies and it makes these things happen. Same thing with depression. You wouldn't say depression is who someone is, but different environmental factors can contribute to someone feeling depressed. And we wouldn't clap and applaud, oh, I'm so glad you're depressed. That's awesome. We would want to give them medical care. So if we truly love our kids, we should be treating them just as you and I should be treated. And I just don't believe that those are competing ideas. And I take offense when somebody says, well, you don't accept your child for who they are. It's not a personality trait. This isn't like, I want Beau to be the star of the basketball team and instead he wants to play violin, or I want him to be outgoing and instead he's kind of introverted and quiet. It's not a personality trait. I want Beau to be who he is, but part of that is him feeling as good as that he can feel. So I think that we need to really think through what we're saying when we say, oh, well, I just accept my child's autism. Well, I accept Beau, but that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that his body's in distress and he needs help.
So well said. So we've got some things on the horizon for Beau that we have identified and that are sort of our next targets for him. Things like Clostridia, Epstein-Barr. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So it's funny, we finished HBOT on Wednesday, and the next day we're on to our next thing, which I should have started it sooner, but there's lots of moving parts to that. But we're treating Clostridia right now, which I will hand over to you to kind of speak more about from the medical perspective, but that's what we're treating right now. And funnily enough, HBOT is part of that treatment too. I mean, HPOT does so many different things. I mean, Beau's got mitochondrial dysfunction, detoxification issues, you name it. But also, oxygen is toxic to Clostridia. And so, I mean, that also is helping that. But the next day we started Dr. Shaw's protocol for that. And so it's going to be 4 weeks. So we're about 5 days into that. So far, so good. And I'm really excited to see what happens. I'm very hopeful. He has had this anywhere from several months ago to a year and a half, just based off of, okay, that year's stool sampling and the next year's testing. I want to see how much this is contributing to his OCD tendencies, to different behavioral issues, and OCD. And I'm hopeful if we don't get too far on that, it still needs to be treated. And we still have one more thing on our agenda, that a PANS issue that's contributing to that OCD and behavioral issues. But yeah, we started that just a handful of days ago, and we're going to do that for 4 weeks and then touch base. So you could I'll hand this off to you, but man, Clostridia is just something that I'm like, why is everyone with a psychiatric issue not being tested for this? I listened to so many medical lectures. I had emailed you, okay, I'm about to bang my head against a wall. I can't listen to any more.
Yeah.
I can't listen to any more medical lectures on this. But it's fascinating, the statistics on the people that are dealing with that and the link with different psychiatric issues. So
Yeah.
maybe you can kind of talk about the importance of testing for that. That's all, we found that out through his stool testing through here.
Yeah. So Clostridia is a bacteria. It is prolific in the intestine. And there's a lot of research that shows potential links between the presence of Clostridia and an autism diagnosis, a schizophrenia diagnosis. There are studies that tell us kids with autism have a more likely chance of having high Clostridia in their intestine than a neurotypical kid. And so we can test that a couple of different ways. Organic acids tests kind of give us a little clue into that. Stool tests also give us a clue into that as well. And so when a child has Clostridia that is overgrowing in their intestine, it's very disruptive to the way they think, the way they behave, the way they learn, the way they can, language, all of it. So knowing about Clostridia, if you have a complex kid, it's critical to know about.
Yeah, I remember whenever I first started my research, it was like, okay, that's a big one to look for. And he never had that issue until last year's, we saw that on there. And so I knew like, ooh, okay, this is a big one. And having said that, like, it's not exactly good news, but at the same time, it gives us a target of like, maybe that's what's going on with these behaviors. It gives us something to treat. And yeah, it's something that should be ruled out for everybody. And I think of all the people that are not being tested for that could be a big contributing factor. And there's a link also with that leading to low cholesterol and different things. But kind of a light bulb went off for me whenever I was kind of doing more research on that, brushing up on that topic, because with his absorption going up with treating the mold, his cholesterol had finally came up because he had been taking supplement for so long. And it finally like went up with that, but then it kind of dipped down, and not as much, but it dipped down a little. And I was like, well, why? That's weird. And then that really was my light bulb moment. Oh, it's because of the Clostridia. So kind of what we were talking about earlier with the dirty bombs going off in your body and disrupting all your systems. One thing just really leads to the next. And then after Clostridia, we are going to be treating one of his PANS flares. EBV, I think, is what we have left on that list. So probably homeopathy, like we did in the past with some other PANS flare issues.
Yeah. So Epstein-Barr virus is a booger. So Epstein-Barr is the virus that would give you mononucleosis, chronic fatigue syndrome, etc. Most of us are exposed to it. It's just part of life. We're exposed to it. Most of us don't even know. Our immune systems just respond appropriately, take care of it, and it goes dormant. But what we're really finding in complex kids is that Epstein-Barr is just this burr under the saddle, right? So it will create PANS, the
Mhm.
pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome, um, when the levels are high enough, we've seen Epstein-Barr trigger atypical seizures in PANS. We've also seen adults with chronic Epstein-Barr that they didn't know they had, that
Mhm.
research is telling us will trigger autoimmunity. So we see people with RA and lupus and any number of autoimmune conditions, and the trigger is Epstein-Barr.
Yeah.
So, it's just so common now that on my standard blood work panel, I add Epstein-Barr,
Mhm.
because it's a really big deal. It's a big deal for Beau, and
Yeah.
so, yeah, we'll be using, homeopathy to try to get his immune system to respond appropriately and take care of that
Yeah.
high viral load.
And Beau is, we haven't talked about it too much on this live, but Beau is like a PANS kid. So we've treated the PANDAS, which is strep specific for him in the past, and mold, obviously mold like induced PANS and other things like that. So he's lots of the immune system dysfunctions from the vaccine injury that kind of have that chain effect of all of these things, and we have to constantly watch for. That's why we have to keep on top of blood work, and I should probably do it more often than I do to see, okay, what was he not able to clear like a typical person would clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Before we open it up for questions, any final thoughts? Is there anything we didn't cover about that sweet kid of yours?
A couple of thoughts. I'm long-winded, I know. We kind of talked a little bit about how I feel. These are not competing ideas for accepting your child and for your child receiving medical treatment. I do want to make sure that I am very clear, because there's a lot of misconception with what am I trying to do here. I'm trying for Beau to have the happiest, healthiest, most functionally independent life that he can have. But I'm also, I don't think that I can heal Beau. So a lot of people think like, well, what are you trying to do? Like you're in denial. You think that you can heal Beau. Well, I don't think I can do anything. I think that I'm completely surrendered to God's will for Beau's life, whether whatever end of the spectrum or not on the spectrum he's on, I'm completely surrendered to God's will for Beau's life. But um, God gives us our brains for a reason, just like I wouldn't jump into oncoming traffic and say, well, it's God's decision when I die, so I might as well do that. No, he gives us our brain, and I am to steward Beau's health and well-being the best that I can. And so if he puts me on this path, then I should do it to love my child the best I can while also being surrendered to God's will for his life. There's a lot of kind of in the autism is medical community, especially at first, with parents that are so desperate to heal their kids, like I am. I want Beau's healing. There's a lot of, oh, you can do it, you can heal him. And I've never bought into that mentality because I don't believe that I have that power. I'm not God. So I never said, I'm going to heal him by the time he's 5, or I'm going to heal him by the time he's 6. And I've really been reflecting on this lately because he's about to have his 6th birthday. My job is to do what God tells me to do to best love Beau as I would want to be loved, love my neighbor as myself, and especially my child. And whatever the results of those are up to God. But I'm completely surrendered to Him on that. But that doesn't take away from my responsibility of seeking the best medical care that I can get or give him. So I think that that's really important to distinguish, because sometimes people will think, um, you know, oh, I can do this and I can control this. And I have a peace that can only come from God. And I'm surrendered to Him on that. I just need to do my part. And also, along that note, if you are discouraged because you've heard before, well, you have to have healing before they start kindergarten. You have to have feeling, it's for the 5th or 6th birthday. I can't remember what was always said. Our goal should always be to progress our child forward. And like I was talking about earlier, don't compare it to another child or to when they're 3. Um, Autism is not so black and white that there's, in other words, if Beau's got 20 issues and I get healing for 5 of them, I'm going to do that. It's not like, I think, before I knew much about autism, I didn't realize the wide range of issues. Maybe it's sensory, it's behavioral, it's intellectual, it's whatever. I don't always get a say in like, okay, what's this treatment going to give them? Like I remember when we treated Pandas, I thought, well, maybe behaviors. And instead, a tick that he had went away. I didn't even know it was a tick until I'm like, that was a tick. A couple of things like you don't always know where the body is going to lead. It's just you always want to move your child forward to have the best health, happiness, and function that they can have for themselves. Don't compare them to another child. Don't think there's no hope after 5 or 6 years of age. There absolutely is. And there's a big difference between a child with an autism diagnosis that is that is harming themselves, harming others, that is in pain with their GI tract, and somebody that, yeah, they have an autism diagnosis, but they're able to communicate. They're not in pain. They're happy. You see their personality. You see, like, there's differences. So don't get so caught up in diagnosis versus no diagnosis, and instead just try to get for your child the best health and happiness outcome that you can get. But I've really been thinking about that because I remember starting off in this and people being like, you can heal him by the time he's 5. Well, he has had healing by the time he's 5, but that doesn't mean he can't have more or that there's some magical number there. I hope that makes
Agreed.
sense.
It makes total sense. All right. So we've got just a couple minutes left. Does anybody have questions? Do you want to that you would want to ask myself or Jamie? We were happy to answer anything. I'll give you just a minute to drop those in the comments before we let you get on with your day. So, Chelsea. So Chelsea is our friend from St. Genevieve, and she wants to chat about Clostridia for Lexi, your daughter. So yeah, Chelsea will definitely do that. As people, if you decide to leave a comment, go ahead and do that. But you'll see that I have put lots of things in the comments, resources for you. So information about where you can get more information on PANS Pandas, on low cholesterol, on any number of the things that we've talked about. I've given you names and websites and things like that as we've been talking. So if you have more questions, you can go to those resources. You can always, Cora says you both did so well. Thank you. You can always look on our website, covenantwellness.net. You can email me. If you have any questions at all, I try to be very diligent about getting back with people. And so we are going to be doing Covenant. No, sorry, I was typing Covenant and I said Covenant. We're going to be doing Facebook Lives with a series of parents. So next month on April 7th, I'm going to be talking to another fantastic mom named Casey Kuster. She's going to be talking about her situation and kind of her journey through an autism diagnosis as well. And then we're going to come together in May, and it's going to be myself plus Jamie and Casey and Brittany, who I visited with last month. We're going to do a roundtable where we're all together on this platform. And we're going to be talking about issues, answering questions, things like that. So definitely watch social media for more details on that. And so, Jamie, thank you. I knew this would be fantastic. You're so well spoken. You're such a great mom.
Thank
you're
you.
raising amazing kids, and I'm just always grateful for every family who walks through the door, that they trust me and they trust the work that we do here. And
we love you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. We'll see you guys April 7th for Casey's Facebook Live. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.